And we are recording, everybody, so. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the director of the Larkspur Library, and I'm here with Jennifer Gately from the Bolinas Museum, and we'd like to welcome you. We're gonna let more people are coming into the room, so we'll start in a couple minutes. So again, thank you for joining us today. We are recording today's session, so if for some reason you lose your connection or be bumped off, we will have the recordings available later today. Jennifer or someone from the Bolinas Museum will send them out there, and I'll send them out for the Larkspur Library. And the Larkspur Library does have a YouTube channel where we post everything. We also will be taking questions and answers at the end of the presentation. So make sure you use the Q&A box or the chat box to put your questions in, and then we'll relay them to Jeff at the end, or to Jennifer O'Keefe, who's also joining us, who actually curated the exhibit that's at the Bolinas Museum. So.
I should be quiet, shouldn't I?
So again, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the library director for the Larkspur Library here in Larkspur, California. And we partnered with the Bolinas Museum to bring you this talk this afternoon. Jennifer, did you want to say something about the museum?
Sure, I'd love to. First of all, thank you so much for all your hard work in putting this together. We really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with friends near and far, and we're so grateful for this opportunity. My name is Jennifer Gately, and I'm the director of the Bolinas Museum, where it is our mission to collect, preserve, and exhibit the art and history of coastal Marin, and to present exhibitions and events that provide our community and our visitors with cultural enrichment and inspiration. We are very thrilled that we were able to put together a really remarkable exhibition thanks to the curatorial prowess of our friend Jennifer O'Keefe, guest curator of a really wonderful exhibition we're going to hear more about today called The Golden Decade. And we are disappointed that we don't have our doors open to you now, but stay tuned. Who knows? Think good thoughts, and hopefully we'll see the curve dip downward soon and be able to welcome you again through our doors. Just to note, we are always free. We welcome everyone and anyone here at Bolinas Museum, weekend hours generally under normal conditions and by appointment. So with that, I'm going to pass it off back to you, and let's hear about this incredible exhibition.
So I'm going to hand it back to you, Jeff. Are you ready?
I'm ready to share my screen.
Okay. So you should be able to share, Jeff. And I'd like everybody to introduce Jeff Gunderson. He's a librarian at the San Francisco Art Institute, but he's also on the library board of directors here for Larkspur. And sorry about my little chat boxes ringing, so I'm going to mute myself, guys.
Let's see here. Okay, I guess there should be some rules or something that I should set up as a real place, right? That if there's no smoking, that's the first thing. There's no smoking in here, so everybody be careful with that. This exhibition is really stunning. And I've seen this work. This is mid-century California photography for the most part. And it's really a fascinating set of things. And better than that, it's a great story of all these different individuals who participated in this world. I've seen variants of the work of these photographers for a number of years now. And this show of it is so spectacular for Jennifer O'Keeffe's curating of these wonderful contact 4x5-inch contact prints. And they're just so rich. And, you know, perhaps it has something to do with me being a librarian and liking things that are about that size as you read, as you truly read things in real books. But the photographs appear as they should have, you know, as, you know, these contact prints, like the photographers saw them through that lens when they shot them through their 4x5 photographs. There are other things in the show as well, but the 4x5 things are absolutely stunning. So when you do get a chance to get to Bolinas, and we can all gather together at some point, I hope you get a chance to see these things, because it really is a great show. So thank you, Bolinas Museum. Thank you, Jennifer O'Keeffe. And thank you, Franklin at the Larkspur Library for putting this all together. Can you see the first image here? Can everybody see that? I guess you can't respond back, but I assume you can. This is...
There's no sharing going on yet, Jeff,
So I am sharing, right?
No, we don't see your PowerPoint.
You don't? But you can hear me.
Can hear you fine, and I can see you, but we can't see your PowerPoint.
So you cannot see that.
So did you click the little share screen button?
Yeah.
And you selected what you want to share.
Yeah. Let me try it again. Let me see if I can get out of this. So you cannot see my computer at the moment.
Mm-mm.
And you don't see that. You don't see that image.
Yeah, nothing has come up yet on our side.
How about that?
There we go.
Oh, thank
now
God.
We can see your desktop.
All right. Everybody's familiar with the Napoleon Dynamite movie, aren't you? With the song at the wedding where he is so infatuated with technology, as I am. How about that?
Yes, now we can see it.
Lovely. Okay. The Golden Decade. This is so this presentation truly is about mid-century California photography, and it focuses on that and these people. This is the title that was done by that was started by Ira Latur, Cam McCauley, and Bill Hike, and completed by Ken and Victoria Ball. That was published by Steidl Press, probably the preeminent photo publisher in the world in Germany. And it recognized that Steidl recognized that this was something that really needed to be done. Not that it was lost to the world, because people were certainly familiar with this history and the fact of Northern California photography, but the fact that it was never published in this wonderful way that Steidl did. So this is the title of the publication, The Golden Decade, California School of Fine Arts Photography from 45 to 55. As we continue through, California photography really grew up, California and photography grew up together in the 19th century. The fortunes made by the robber barons who built those railroads was money they used to hire photographers to document their success. Those same photographers were also attracted to not just the money, but also that same light and those landscapes that intrigued the 19th century painters, photographers like Carlton Watkins with this photograph of Yosemite. And folks like Edward Muybridge, who followed the money and explored the territory, another photograph of Yosemite. And with Muybridge, he winds up being at the beginning of moving pictures shown in San Francisco. By the early 20th century, photography supporters like Alfred Stieglitz in his Camera Work magazine wrestled with the idea of photography as art. And camera work included women photographers and California photographers like Annie Brigman. this pictorialism, trying to somehow equate things with painting. But by the 1920s, there was a reaction against those contrivances of pictorialism, most notably with the West Coast F-64 photographers that advocated a fine art of straight photography, as they called it, as evidenced by Ansel Adams's photograph of this view of the Golden Gate. And I was thinking about this photograph the other day, and I really should try to figure it out with the Center for Photography, but he's up there in an airplane in the early 1930s taking this photograph with a large format camera in the wintertime with those clouds. And so you really realize that his landscape photography wasn't just on a tripod on top of his Cadillac in the late 1940s, but he was trying to do a lot of different things at that time, but this wonderful image. Another of those F-64 photographers, California photographer Edward Weston, Imogen Cunningham, Alma Levinson. This group of photographers were on a mission spearheaded by Ansel to promote their conception of photography to fine art. This is a flyer for a 1932 exhibition that was held at the De Young Museum that included the main set of them. Ansel was in good company in the California art world of the 1930s. He made sure that the newly constructed San Francisco Museum of Art was in cahoots with his plans to include, if not highlight, photography. And he had a prominent fellow traveler in the museum's director, Grace McCann Morley, a true believer in photography, and particularly California photography. Morley orchestrated a major show about Edward Weston. She and the museum embraced photography as a fine art, and Ansel was very happy. After World War II, Ansel started a photo department in San Francisco at the California School of Fine Arts, shown here in an image from a college catalog on Russian Hill, looking out towards Telegraph Hill. It was filled with students on the GI Bill after the war, loaded with wonderful photographers. The faculty included Minor White, Edward Weston, Dorothea Lange, Lisette Modell, Imogen Cunningham. However, the school was really known for its painters, for abstract expressionist painting. This is a roll book from Ansel's first fall class in 1946. That department attracted these GI Bill students from World War II veterans who were ready to take up their life again after years of their lives being on hold. And you can tell how involved they were from this roll book, which probably violates all kinds of student record standards for today. But as you can see, they all were there. The attendance record, they're all checks on there. They were all there. You know, you see David Johnson's name right at the top there with Purple Jones, and they were there every day to figure out what they were going to deal with photography in that fine art world. San Francisco made sense to these returning vets, not just because it was the place they had shipped in and out of during World War II, but also for its distance from where they were from Paducah and Paoli and Peoria. All of them had to struggle with the facts: 2 world wars in 30 years, the Holocaust, and the atom bomb. Another group of those photographers hamming it up for the camera. Ansel thought that everything points to an intense cultural development on the West Coast following the war, and that with the school and the museum, quote, a magnificent photographic center will develop that would unquestionably lead the field in this country, if not the world. Ansel he had big ideas, he had big thoughts, he was confident. And he was confident that this was going to happen, especially with him spearheading this thing. Ansel's photos from this period include a set called Near Bolinas, as they appear in his titles. And people in Bolinas should try to, you can tell me afterwards or tell me at some point, but I think, is this Duxbury Reef? I'm not sure, but I think it's looking towards San Pedro Point down in San Mateo County. It is?
That's Duxbury Reef, yes.
but a beautiful photograph by Ansel's that I obviously swiped it from somewhere and scanned it, but you don't see this very often. Another of Ansel's, Barn and Fence, near Bolinas, as he says, in the late 1930s. And another of Ansel's set of photographs near Bolinas. It'd be terrific to find all these at the Center for Creative Photography and do a nice little book of West Marin photographs.
We have a copy of this in our collection.
Oh, you do have this photograph?
Yes.
Nice. It's a beautiful photograph. Ansel made sure that this growing group of photographers, the students and others in the Bay Area, were exposed to one of his main mentors, Edward Weston. One of Weston's classic photographs, one of his nudes from that time period of the 30s and 1940s. Ansel hired Weston to teach. This is a very nice archival document in the archives here at the Art Institute, a remnant of Weston's personnel data sheet. And it's very succinct. Professional photographer since about 1910, and photography, personal instructor for 30 years. And then under education, first year only of high school, 1903. Ansel also roped in his noted friends, the writers and photo historians Nancy and Beaumont Newhall. This is a photograph at Ansel's house by Kirkle Jones. And this was the same time that Beaumont was working on his seminal book, The First History of Photography, published in 1949. This is my nerdy librarian nod to bibliography. Ansel had Beaumont Newhall develop a basic reading list, a basic books for a photographic library for the San Francisco Art Institute's Anne Bremer Memorial Library, which is worthy of somebody's MA thesis at some point in library school. Ansel also hired Dorothea Lange, another local photographer who I believe might have been living in Mill Valley at the time, a very different kind of photographer than Ansel. Evidenced by her 1930s photographs of the Depression era America, the Dust Bowl, done for the Farm Security Administration, documenting rural poverty. Lange's and her book with her second husband, Paul Taylor, An American Exodus, a record of human erosion. And Lange's photos of West Marin, a sweet book she was putting together when she died in 1964, To a Cabin, about her family's stays at Steep Ravine, just south of Stinson Beach, with views looking towards Bolinas in the background across the sea. Another view of the beach at Steep Ravine looking toward northwest towards Bolinas. Another of Ansel's faculty was Imogen Cunningham, who lived here on Russian Hill. It's a Lizette Modell portrait of Imogen Cunningham when Lizette Modell came out to hang around at the school in 1946. One of Imogen's very quiet, sort of still life photographs from that time period. And a great photo by Leo Holub, who had studied here at the school in the 1930s and who is attached to this group of the Golden Decade in a funny way, although not a student. But Leo took this photograph of Imogen Cunningham at Shell Beach at Tamales Bay, circa 1950, where we all should be at the moment, probably. The school, the California School of Fine Arts, the San Francisco Art Institute, where Ansel had established this dynamic photography department, was still very much about painting, especially abstract expressionist painting, like this one by Clifford Still. Mark Rothko came to teach during the summers of 1947 and 1949, where he was influenced as much by these mature students as he influenced them. This is a photograph by Bill Hike. Rothko taught two different classes. He taught a painting class, and he taught a class on contemporary arts. And this is his lecture class on contemporary arts. And we think that's Lizette Modell in the lower right there with that head of white hair, because she was around and would have sat in on Rothko's interpretation of what was going on in the art world. And it's really interesting to look at Rothko's roll books, where in his painting class, he gives everybody a B. And he figures, yeah, painting's a struggle. Nobody deserves, everybody. He'd give himself a B. You know, in this class, which was more like very subjective, he gave everybody an A. Rothko's painting from 1943, a famous painting, his called Slow Swirl at the Edge of the Sea, prior to him first teaching at the Art Institute. A painting of his in between the two summers that he taught here from 1948. And then a painting from 1949, which does show his mature style that he did right after his last time teaching here. So I digress with painting, but of course the photo students at that time, including Bill Hike, took photographs of some of these things. This is Hike's great photograph, maybe one of the greatest photographs of any artist, of Rothko's in Studio 18 here at the school, smoking cigarettes and blowing out smoke. But a terrific photograph of an artist. Another of Hike's photographs taken for an assignment to document the school studio. And it shows you how hard the students, you know, were having trouble painting the figure. But, you know, more importantly, it really does show Hike's sense of humor, making sure that the painting front and center was oblivious to the life class that he probably put on the tripod for this artist. You know, it's this healthy irreverence from Bill Hike, who always was pretty irreverent about things. In spite of this gig that he had, that he was getting paid to do, to photograph the studios, to show the school in this serious light, you know, this is what Hike winds up with. As they sort of grappled with that figure, it resulted in the beginnings of Bay Area figurative painting, initiated by this painting done by David Park at the school in 1949 of the school's Studio 13 jazz band. And Park paints his ear into this painting because he's on the piano. And the person on the drums, far away in the red shirt, is Douglas McKagy, who was the director of the school at the time, who was the person who had hired Ansel to begin the photography program. Many of those students also enrolled in the first avant-garde film classes ever taught anywhere that McKagy had started by Sidney Peterson, who's shown here on the right. It sort of goes hand in hand with photography in some respects. And the filmmaker on the left is Bill Hike, who winds up becoming a filmmaker as well as a photographer trained by Ansel and Miner. And yet Ansel always figured, hey, it's all about photography and not much else. As you can see him here in the dark room with photographers Philip Hyde, Perkle Jones on the right, and Muriel Green. The real intellectual force behind this program and this set of people was a fellow traveler with the avant-garde art world, and who was in that photography department was Minor White. He'd been hired by Ansel at the suggestion from Beaumont and Nancy Newhall. Miner moved to San Francisco, lived in Ansel's home near Seacliff. Some of Miner's photographs from this time period of street scenes of San Francisco. This one's titled Columbus Avenue. Another one called Warehouse Area. When Miner left the city, he left all of his negatives to the California Historical Society. So there's this nice set of images at the California Historical Society of Miners. Miner made sure that the students found their way to study with Edward Weston. Students would go on week-long field trips to the Monterey Peninsula, where Weston would lead the way. Weston made sure students would leave their cameras in their cars so that they could first experience Point Lobos rather than take pictures. You know, there were no iPhones that they were going to look through and see that scenery. Weston's leading the pack here as they roam Point Lobos. Those students included the nucleus of an ever-growing community of photographers in the Bay Area that they were truly attuned to a similar aesthetic, schooled by mentors in what Ira Latur called the Grove of Akademus. Here's a set of them that includes the African-American photographer David Johnson, standing between Edward Weston and his plaid shirt and Minor White, and Muriel Green, looking as lovely as ever on the right there. I always look at this picture and realize that David and Muriel surely would have shared the Best Dress Award in this class. You know, most of them were kind of that grunge look on the left, but you know, David and Muriel had style. They were looking good. In the evenings, the students would gather at Weston's Wildcat Hill to view prints of Weston's images. As much as Miner and Ansel and Weston would stress the aesthetics and even the spiritual aspects of photography, the students were just as interested in technique, cameras, and contraptions, as illustrated by Brett Weston's show and tell of his 11x14 view camera that he had made. You see Weston here, his father, Edward West, on the right, and Miner's poring over it, wondering what in the heck, how do you lug that around? And then Brett showing off his 11x14 contact prints of New York City that he had taken. And Brett posing. And the more I look at this photograph, you know, that's a look. That is a look right there. You know, he's got the white t-shirt tucked in with that muscle belt and that one arm akimbo, that blonde hair of his, and that pipe. You know, I mean, that's a good look for a photographer, you got to admit. The students with their 4x5 cameras working near the school and at the bottom in a lighting and portraiture class with Miro Green as their model. Student David Johnson picking the brain of a guest speaker, Bob McAllister, an expert on optics. All the while, Ansel divided his time between the national parks and his Guggenheim projects. He'd roam down from the Sierra to teach. Many of the students took their cue from Dorothea Lange, shown here in the lower right-hand corner. Lange would advocate a different kind of thinking than Ansel's, to photograph while taking a stance, encouraging the use of small format cameras. Here the students are amused as Dorothea is probably criticizing Ansel's narrow focus on the landscape. They're all getting a kick out of it. You can see this range of thought and ideas of these two great photographers in this image where Dorothea, Lange, and Ansel are discussing the work of Lisette Models. You know, Ansel just looks exasperated by the whole thing, and yet he always encouraged different approaches and certainly had great respect for Lange's photography. Another discussion of Ansel with Imogen Cunningham, and you have to love Imogen's expression. It's sort of like, oh, Ansel, you pipsqueak. But again, it demonstrates Ansel embracing many different perspectives. You know, Dorothea's, Imogen's, and Minor White's, and many others. The student camaraderie. They would go to Ansel's house and have parties and do group exchanges of prints. And when I realized all these years that for a number of years, I thought, oh, these exchange prints, it's one set of prints. And then you realize each set is probably very different, you know, depending on the semester that they would have exchanged them and then which ones people got in the exchanges, they sort of, you know, traded them back and forth. One of the earliest students of this group of student photographers was Ira Latur, who was from Carmel. He went on to teach at San Francisco State University and then finished up his career teaching, a longtime teacher at Chico State. He's shown here with a self-portrait, holding a portrait that Ansel had made of him around 1945. I think the photograph was used in one of Ansel's guide series on techniques that he did that was so famous from the late 40s. Benjamin Chen, another one of those terrific students who also came to the school on the GI Bill, had grown up in Chinatown with 11 brothers and sisters, had his own darkroom, which probably rivaled Ansel's, and was one of the few students who took painting classes with those people like Clifford Still and Diebenkorn and David Park, and he also took those early avant-garde film classes with Sidney Peterson. Benjamin Chen traveled to Paris after his time at the Art Institute and did a series of photographs. A show was held at the San Francisco International Airport. These wonderful photographs of his time when he was in Paris. And they appeared, a set of those photographs appeared in the second issue of Aperture magazine, which was the photo magazine was founded in San Francisco at the Art Institute with Miner as its first editor. The issue number 1 of Aperture from 1952. Ruth Marion Baruch was another one of those younger artists who knew Weston and Ansel before she came to the school. Here's a portrait of her. Baruch studied at the University of Missouri and then went on to graduate to graduate school at Ohio University, where she does an MA thesis on Weston. And she comes out and visits Weston to finish up her MA thesis. At that time, Weston introduces her to Ansel, and Ansel tells her how he's going to start a photography program at this California School of Fine Arts. And even though she had the first master's degree in photography from anywhere, the first master's student anywhere, she realized she knew very little about photography after being with Ansel and with Weston. And so she enrolls in those classes at the Art Institute in the fall of 1946. One of Baruch's photographs from the late 40s, early 1950s, some of which wind up in the Family of Man show, which was held at the New York Museum of Modern Art in 1955. And it was organized by Edward Steichen. You have to love the cover of this catalog, calling the show the greatest photographic exhibition of all time. These people in this time period were confident. They had egos for sure, but they were very confident about how they portrayed that world of photography. Steichen was actually Ansel's nemesis in many ways. So, the two of them did not get along, but there's this crossover with the Family of Man show. Another stellar student from that time period was Perkle Jones, a GI vet who made his way from Louisiana, Indiana, and Ohio to the Pacific Theater of War, and then to Ansel's photography department. Ruth Marion and Perkle met in the program, fell in love, and then are married by Ansel in Yosemite in 1949, illustrating the closeness of this band of artist photographers, overlapping their personal lives and their photographic interests. Perkle and Ruth Marion moved to Marin above Mill Valley in the mid-1960s into one of the most beautiful houses where they had their dark rooms, their books, and their cats, and Perkle's orchids. Perkle worked as an assistant to Ansel in the 1950s and as a collaborator on photo projects such as the Story of a Winery book that they did for, I think it was Paul Masson Winery. And all Perkle and Ruth Marion's work now exists at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and it's all been digitized, and it's terrific to go through all of their outtakes of things, all 6,600 images that are there. Perkle was a collaborator also with on a terrific project with Dorothea Lange called Death of a Valley, about making Lake Berryessa, the damming of Berryessa Valley, documenting the end of a community. And at the same time, what I sort of think is truly one of the very first environmental photo essays when you look at the work. Ruth Marion and Perkle also worked on projects together, one on Walnut Grove, California, and this highly acclaimed photo essay on the Black Panthers, which they did with the approval of Kathleen and Eldridge Cleaver, who used a lot of their images in the Black Panther newspaper in the late 1960s and early 70s. This show was shown at the DeYoung Museum in 1968. It was the first photographic exhibition at the Studio Museum of Harlem in 1969. And a set of these photos were part of the recent Soul of a Nation show at the DeYoung Museum last year. Perkle's work was featured in an Aperture monograph in 2001. Another of the fascinating photographers of this group is David Johnson, GI Bill student from racist Jim Crow, Florida. He made his way as a 17-year-old into the military during World War II, where he experienced the last years of a totally segregated Navy. After the war, he returned to Florida, saw an ad in a magazine about a school starting in San Francisco. He pursued the idea of becoming a photographer, wrote a letter to Ansel, and applied to the school. And he wound up at the train station in San Francisco, where he was met by Minor White and taken to live in Ansel's house on 24th Avenue above Baker Beach, right by Seacliff. He was the youngest student in that first full photography class and the only African American. As David says in his autobiography, he felt he was dropped through the rabbit hole and into the realm of photographic geniuses. One of David's photos from the Fillmore District's after hours clubs. And David's photographs, you know, are remarkable for that kind of decisive moment that, you know, Cartier-Bresson titles a book a couple years later. And, you know, you see it in this photograph. And of course you see the, you know, the cool cat with the sunglasses, you know, up front center there listening to the music. But David's photographs just exude this kind of decisive moment of things. One of his iconic images of San Francisco's Fillmore District from the time, known as the Harlem of the West. David photographed his times, the African-American community in the Fillmore, as well as illustrious visitors to the city, like Langston Hughes, Thurgood Marshall, Jackie Robinson, Nat King Cole, and other iconic figures of the jazz world. Etched in concrete at the Gene Suttle Plaza in the Fillmore is written, David Johnson, photographer and photojournalist. He studied with Ansel Adams. Another one of those decisive moment photographs of David's shows this thing. This one really shows that incredible range of all the photographers in the program pursuing very different kinds of photography, but grounded in this very serious training radiated by Ansel and Miner and Weston and Imogen Cunningham and Dorothea Lange. I hope David's in the audience here. He lives in Larkspur, so he goes to the Larkspur Library, and I hope he went out and saw the show in Bolinas, but he should get out there and see it. So, but hopefully we should do a shout out to David here. Good job, David. I think you're onto something with this photography, David. So keep taking these pictures. I think you're doing a good job.
He was one of the many who enjoyed the opening here at Bolinas Museum. And
Oh, good. He did see him. Excellent. Excellent. Charles Wong was a World War II vet from San Francisco who was the first photographer to win the prestigious Albert Bender Award in photography in 1952. The project for his grant was titled The Year of the Dragon, which was published by Miner in Aperture magazine in 1953. And it showed San Francisco's Chinatown. The Year of the Dragon was this insightful photo essay into the Americanization of Chinese Americans in San Francisco and the ramifications of what was then the recent communist takeover of mainland China. Don White was born in Manhattan, grew up in Scotland, started photography as a kid, began a film society while a student at Oxford, worked in the art world in London, filmed and photographed around Europe in the 1930s, and then later studied with Bernice Abbott in New York City. He served in World War II, where he was a photographer in the Pacific. After the war, he moved to San Francisco, lived close to Ansel, out in Seacliff, and decided he wanted to go to the photo program at the Art Institute. And he's just one more of these unbelievably fascinating characters, and he's important because his daughter, Victoria, and her husband, Ken Ball, are the ones who finished up the Golden Decade book. And so they're the ones who have been great advocates of this work for many, many years. And so Don White is, you know, very instrumental to this entire this entire world of these photographers. This is a photo by Benjamin Chen, a great portrait of Don White. One of Don White's photographs is still life of a broken down bicycle in the city, and another abstracted image of Don White's. Gerald Rada, who is in the show, began at UC Berkeley in architecture, then switched to study with Miner at the California School of Fine Arts. He concentrated on architectural photography. And when Miner moved to Rochester in 1953, Miner referred all of his old clients to Jerry Rado. So you get some idea of Jerry's expertise and Miner's confidence in Jerry. Jerry's client list over the years has included I.M. Pei, Buckminster Fuller, Gensler Associates, Skidmore, Owings, Merrill. And check out his webpage, which has this wide range of both the vintage work from this time period along with more current things. Jerry's terrific cover for the book, The Golden Decade. and a wonderful portrait of Jane Russell, who, you know, this is a great portrait of Jane Russell, but the way she's framed with these three photographers is just so fascinating with those cameras. Terrific photographer. And Jerry's photograph of portrait of Minor White. Stan Zernich came to the school's photography program by way of Yosemite, where he was working and where he crossed paths and met Ansel. Stan, like David Johnson before him, stayed at Ansel's house until he could find a place to live in the city. After graduating, he and his wife started the Photographers Gallery in San Francisco with Charles Wong and Jerry Ratto. One of Stan's pictures. One is a Stan Zernich photo of a Marin photo showing a piece of Marin by a Marin photographer. Stan still lives in San Rafael. John Upton came to the school at the age of 19 in 1951. He was already familiar with Ansel, had heard him lecture in Los Angeles. He studied ceramics at the school as well as photography. This is a photo of John by Minor White. Later, after serving in Korea, he continued studying with photography with Minor White and Beaumont Newhall in Rochester, New York. And one of John's many claims to fame is that he's the author of what is probably the most widely used, what was the most widely used and still is successful textbooks on photography. This is an image of the cover of the 40th anniversary edition, the 12th edition, which was used by all photographers in college photography programs from the 60s on. One of the later students during this decade was Jerry Sharp, who would go on to being one of Ansel's trusted assistants, as well as one of the first women photographers to ever win a Guggenheim Fellowship. Sharp was also one of the founders of the Friends of Photography in Carmel, along with Ansel. And their library was named after her, one of the many, many intriguing photographers from this group that deserve more research and more attention. Another one of those photographers from this circle of people was of like-minded artists, included the youngest of the lot, Steve Goldstein, shown here in 1951. Shows him with a self-portrait that Stephen took of him and Edward Weston. Stephen has always told me about how terrific he thinks that portrait is of Mark Rothko that Bill Hike did as one of the great photographs of an artist, but I think this is one of the great ones as well. It just shows, young Stephen and old Edward, you know, in this image of, you know, them with almost the same glasses on. One of Stephen's photographs, photo composition by Stephen from that time period. A group of Minor's photo comrades. Minor would come back to from the East Coast to do lectures at the Art Institute. This is one from probably 1956 or 1957. White had written about, in Aperture, he had written about teaching at the Art Institute. And the article is called A Unique Experience in Teaching Photography. And he called it a fabulous experiment because of the nature of San Francisco, cosmopolitan, dramatic, Western, and full of verve, coupled with those luminaries of photography who were attracted to the department. But most importantly, he said the quality of the students. Minor thought is essentially a program in photography at the graduate level. The legacy of this first fine arts department is really pretty astounding. And you can see that camaraderie there. You can see Benjamin Chin there, and David Johnson, John Berlino, and others. I think Charles Wong's in there somewhere. The world of photography changes in the 1960s, as evidenced from the summer of 1969 exhibition, which was held at the Art Institute, titled USA in Your Heart, which was put together by photographer Jerry Burchard. Jerry was from Rochester, and he met Minor in Rochester, and he said, I'd like to go to photography school somewhere. And Minor said, you should go to the Art Institute. And so Jerry did, and he stayed here, went to school here, photographed here, and then ran the photography department for a number of years. In this show, he included the establishment photographers, as the world was called. Many people in the world were called in 1969, as well as the underground, bridging the photo world at this very pivotal time. Included in the underground were Bob Heineken, Larry Clark alongside Imogen Cunningham, Ansel Adams, and Aaron Siskin of the Old Guard. Here's an installation shot from that show. And you can see Ansel's moonrise on the wall, as well as an image of his from Yosemite and some others. But alongside it is this ceramic sculpture in front, which shows a mini dress with the photographs of Imogen Cunningham and her friend, Ruth, who made this ceramic piece for Imogen's photograph. So Imogen was ready to experiment in that new world of, photography is sculpture, sculpture is photography, conceptual world within photography. And this photograph from '69, of course, shows Imogen with her peace medallion on as well. Ansel eagerly participated in that new world of conceptual photography as one of the models for Mike Mandel's photographers' baseball cards that were done in the 1970s. And you have to love Ansel's sort of paisley shirt here. And he's the catcher of all things, of course. So he's got his mask on and his glove. And on the back of his photographer's baseball card, Ansel lists his height and his weight and his favorite photographer. And who's it going to be? It has to be Daguerre, doesn't it? I mean, yep, it's favorite photographer Daguerre. He bats right. His favorite camera, none. And he throws right. His home's in Carmel, but he was born in San Francisco. And then his brief manifesto on photography. And of course, Ansel is celebrated in the 70s, here receiving an honorary doctorate from the school at commencement in 1969 from SFAI president Stephen Goldstein, who had been that student in the early 1950s at the school. A partial group of the photo faculty at the school in the 1970s included this cast of character: Henry Wessel, Jerry Bouchard, and Marjorie Mann, along with Jack Fulton on the lower right, a longtime Marin photographer and artist. One of Jack's books, Two Saunters, Summer and Winter. And it has that kind of Marin Bay Area aesthetic sensibility of collage, writing, and photography, much in the same way as Marin artist and one of Jack's comrades, William T. Wiley, does with his painting and drawing. Another Jack's photographs, writing all over the photograph with a pun. Linda Connor, another Marin photographer and very long-time member of the SFAI photo faculty. She actually has taught, this is her 50th year of teaching at the school. Here she is with students in Studio 16 in the 1970s, one of Linda's beautiful work. And Linda's baseball photographer card by Mike Mandel. And she lists herself as 6'2" and 106 pounds and born in French Hospital. And here she lists her home as a garden apartment, but it's really a garden home now in Fairfax. John Collier Jr. of Muir Beach was one of the most influential teachers at the school. And although he did not study at the school in the photography department, he had been there as a painting student in the 1930s and a family friend of Dorothea Lange's. Then he became one of the Farm Security Administration photographers in the 1940s. He taught at the school in the 1950s, overlapping with the beginning of when Perkle Jones taught here. And then he taught again from the 1970s to the 1990s, influencing a generation of photographers, as well as being influential in that art world of Marin County with fellow artists from Muir Beach. He lived in Muir Beach along with Bill Wiley, Dorothy Wiley, and the filmmakers Gunvor Nelson and Bob Nelson. One of John's photographs from the New Mexico, from the FSA, the Farm Security Administration project he was involved with. John did a book called Visual Anthropologies, Photography as a Research Method, which really changed the world of anthropologists as well as photographers. John always had great respect for the subject, and he didn't think of people as a subject. He didn't like the idea, I don't think, of even embedding oneself in some situation where they would photograph. He wanted to make sure that it was okay to photograph within another community, and so he brought that to the world of anthropology as well as documentary photography. He taught at San Francisco State as well as here, and a student asked him one time, "John, should I photograph that rock?" And the answer that John said, "Well, you better ask the rock if that's okay." One of John's students was Marin photographer Larry Sultan, an SFAI student in the 1970s who did collaborative projects with Mike Mandel, and who was later a teacher at the Art Institute, as well as at CCA, and whose photographs are based on his own close ties and his roots in many ways to Southern California, but also to his longtime home in Marin. Here he's shown at his place on the Green Beret Boardwalk. And one of Larry's students was Jennifer O'Keefe, who was the curator for this marvelous project in Bolinas. Another one of Larry's students is Mike Light, who has a place in San Francisco, but also lives in Bolinas, a terrific photographer who has mined archives for fascinating photographs, much like Larry had and Mike Mandel did in a piece. Michael Light also does these sort of stunning aerial photography views of different areas, sort of like the same thing that Ansel did with that landscape of the Golden Gate Bridge. But Larry's photographs, and Larry is a teacher who studied with John Collier Jr., and I believe he might have studied with Perkle Jones as well, but was on the same faculty as Perkle, you know, is very much influenced by that same community of artists and photographers. This is one of Larry's image of Mount Tam from the last, I think it's the last series of work he did prior to his death. Another descendant photographer with deep connections is Alice Shaw, shown here on the cover of one of her books themed People Who Look Like Me, and which is filled with portraits, some of whom look like Alice and some who don't look anything at all like Alice. Alice was a TA for Perkle Jones. And Perkle, this is a photograph of Perkle's, Perkle had a wide range of photography. You know, he did those Panther things. He did the Great Panther work with Ruth, Marion, Baruch in the late 60s. So he did plenty of social activist work. He photographed the Gate 5 community and the Sausalito boat people. He also did lots of landscapes. And this is, you know, in honor of his mentor, Ansel Adams. And this is current work by his TA, Alice Shaw, of landscape in West Marin, a nod to Perkle in some respects, with this beautiful gold leaf sky that she has in this image. And this is Alice Shaw's work, No Other Lands Their Glory Know, an image of Mount Tamalpais along the Dipsy Trail, a 20 by 26 foot piece at Gate 95 at SFO's International Terminal. Again, with this amazing gold leaf in the background. So when things open up and you are at the airport, try to go see this stunning work of Alice's, a student of Perkle Jones, who was a student of Ansel Adams. Art Rogers taught at the school in the 1970s, and although he was not a student there, he's a great West Marin photographer who did this marvelous portrait at a tribute dinner to the photographer and longtime teacher, Jerry Burchard, who's sort of front and center there. I apologize for the quality of this one. This is on my office wall here, and I snapped at an angle to avoid the glare, but it shows that camaraderie of these Northern California photographers gathering together, eating, drinking, and a photo by a master portrait photographer. But he did have a good crowd. If you look at this photograph, you know, they sure did know how to pose. I mean, every one of them are looking into that camera. Now, a lot of it has to do with art, but I think these photographers are all seeing as if they're looking through the lens, knowing full well what Art Rogers was looking through that lens. And the people in this group of photographers include an array of people going back to those photographers at mid-century. Bill Hike is in this photograph, for instance, as well as other photographers from the 1940s. And an earlier version of that same kind of gathering of that range of photographers from the Golden Decade period at Ansel's house. This is an Al Richter photograph of a party at Ansel's house. That's in the Ben Chin collection. That's in the Center for Creative Photography. I'll conclude with one more wonderful photo of a huge group of these West Coast photographers at photographer Wayne Miller's home over in the East Bay, where they're there to discuss the Family of Man exhibition. And it's sort of a Where's Waldo image by Fred Lyon. It includes Dorothea Lange there front and center with Wayne Miller. And many of the folk who are just mentioned, David Johnson's there at the front. I think Benjamin Chen is there, maybe on the roof. Perkle Jones is there on the front left, along with Ruth, Marion, Baruch. You know, so this is that Northern California photo world, you know, in trying to figure out how that world's going to morph from their World War II experiences into the 1950s and onward. And some bibliography. One book, The Moment of Seeing, Minor White at the California School of Fine Arts, published by Chronicle Books. The first page of Minor White's essay, A Unique Experience in Teaching Photography, published in the 1956 issue of Aperture. Ansell's biography includes a very nice chapter about him teaching at the school. And of course, the Golden Decade book done by Canon Victoria Ball, Ira Latur, Cam McCauley, and Bill Hite. Thank you very much. That's the virtual presentation of this, but there's nothing that replaces the real life things. So please try to see the terrific exhibition in Bolinas when the world opens up again and you can travel over the hill to West Marin. Thank you.
So if anybody has questions, please use the Q&A box to ask them, or use the chat, and then we'll relay the questions to Jeff.
I'd love to hear a little bit from Jennifer O'Keefe, if possible, too.
And to answer your question, Nancy, this will be available on YouTube later on today, so both for the Bolinas Museum and the Larkspur Library. Jennifer, Jennifer O'Keefe, did you want to talk about the exhibit and the work you did putting it together? Or?
Oh, hi. Sure, I didn't, thank you, Jeff. That was so great. It was so nice to see that again. And just there's so much information in there. So seeing it a second time was fantastic. Yeah, I hadn't prepared anything today, but just briefly, I first worked on a show of this work about 10 years ago at a gallery called Smith Anderson North in San Anselmo, which some of you might be familiar with, and was just really blown away at that time with the quality of the work and just the story behind all the students, and at this particular moment in history and with photography, where it was in its own sort of trajectory in the 20th century, and all these things coming together, you know, the post-war period in San Francisco, and all these people who are really like the first celebrities of photography kind of all conglomerating at the San Francisco Art Institute, California School of Fine Arts, and along with these incredible painters, and just kind of imagining what an incredible feeling it must have been to be a student there at that time, working with these people coming from all over the country, or just, you know, like Benjamin Chen being a native of San Francisco and just having this all happen right there. So it was just it was 10 years ago was the first time I'd ever seen any of it, knew about it, and I was just really taken with it. And I've kind of followed these photographers over the year. It's kind of over the years and kept up with them a little bit. It's sort of this loose family, unfortunately getting smaller as many of the photographers are, you know, in their 90s now, late 80s and 90s. And so we've lost a few of them over the years. But so when Jennifer Gately, you know, presented this opportunity she'd found out about the show at Smith Anderson North and all the various shows that have happened, different versions of it that had happened over the years, and then got a hold of the book and became very interested in showing it at the Bolinas Museum and asked me to curate it, which was a huge honor. Yeah, one of the things that, you know, because there had been so many different versions of the exhibition, I wanted to kind of bring a little something different to it, which is the reason I brought in that 4x5. I'd always wanted to see these 4x5 contact prints all together in one space. because they were all traded amongst the students at these exchange print parties. And they do have such a special quality. They're just like this distilled, like perfect, totally sharp little gems of photographs. And like Jeff mentioned, it's exactly what the students, what the photographers would have seen through the on the ground glass of their view cameras. So it's like this direct translation, you know, using all the tools that they had learned, you know, the zone system, pre-visualization, you know, a combination of Ansel Adams' teaching and Minor White's philosophies kind of both come together in this work. And yeah, I've always just wanted to see it all in one space. And the photography gallery at the Bolinas Museum was just the perfect size. It's this intimate space where you can really line them all up and just go from one to another. And, you know, without having to sort of readjust your vision and look at a big image and look at a small image, they're just all there the same size. And you can just really get into the intimate viewing experience of that. And so that was a really nice opportunity. And just a big thank you to all the photographers. And I had a lot of help. And Jeff, he was, you know, went into the archives at the Art Institute and pulled out a bunch of 4x5 prints I'd never seen before. So a lot of people involved in helping me get that work together. So yeah, it was a huge pleasure. I hope everybody gets to see it.
Well, that still remains to be seen. I just wanted to make a note that it looks like David Johnson has joined us in our chat. And I'm not sure if it's possible to bring him in to be a panelist or not.
Oh yeah, let me.
He may not be set up to do that, but would be wonderful to try.
Well, but if he's working with Jacqueline, let me. Well, let's check. I'm going to promote you, Jacqueline, to a panelist because I think you're with David. So, and then, so they're in the panelist thing now, and I've asked them to unmute.
Okay.
He can hear you.
Hi
There
there.
you go.
Oh, wow. Hi, David. Hi, Jackie.
Hi.
Hi, Jackie. Hi, David.
Hello, how are you?
Great to see you.
Nice to be here. Nice to have my work shown.
Wonderful.
Nice that you saw it.
Such an honor to share it with our visitors. Thank you so very much.
You're quite welcome. Quite welcome. Well, it was quite an adventure from Jacksonville, Florida to California, where I had served a little time and when I was on the U.S. Navy. So when I was discharged from the Navy, went back to my old job, but I was playing around with picture taking and cameras from drugstores. So I got to find a way to learn this. So I found a way. There was a story that Ansel Adams was teaching photography, he was having a show. And I wrote to Ansel, and he says, it doesn't matter, Mr. Johnson, if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, wherever, you're welcome to become a member of this class. Just write me back. I wrote him back and says, I'm most anxious. I went to my boss. I'm returning to my job after the war. And I explained this to him. He said, oh, why don't you go down to the office and get a leave of absence? Okay, I'll go get a leave of absence, which I never got around to it utilizing, because once I got to California and started meeting these wonderful people, I was going to be a house guest with Minor White and some other people. And it finally got my opportunity to go down to the School of Fine Arts. This is it for me. I will stay here and I will do everything that I can to succeed, which I believe that I did. So I'm so happy and pleased that I've lived long enough to see my work shown to a lot of people. And I couldn't have done this so well without the help of my wonderful wife here, Jacqueline Sue. She worked very hard on put this together. I feel elated, really. You know, it's just a wonderful feeling that God spared me. He says, David, I'm not ready for you yet. There's some goodies out there for you. Don't worry about it. I said, yes, Lord. I'll just sit tight. And it happened. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you, David.
Jennifer, for a wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Jackie. Thank you, David. Hope to see you again soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for your participating.
All right.
Keep taking pictures, David.
Yeah.
You take it. I got my cell phone.
Good. Those are good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do a David Johnson cell phone picture show. That sounds good.
Yeah.
to me.
That'd be fun to see. I'd love to see that.
So two questions did come in. The first one was from Randy B. It was 1 year of high school, reason economic rebel without a cause. And I think that might be to Ansel Adams.
Oh, that was, I think, Edward Weston's personnel data sheet where he was in high school for a year. But I don't know, who knows what, I should look that up. I just get a kick out of it, and then I stop there. I'm like a real good archivist who should prowl around and try to figure out, well, did he have to go to, maybe he had to go to work, although I think he probably started to do some photography things even at that time. Although, I don't know, he was probably, he was probably too young to be doing photography. I should do a little more in-depth research on Weston. Do you know Jennifer by any chance?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
It was essentially what Edward Weston, 1 year of high school, what did he do? He didn't photograph at that age as a young teenager, I don't think, although he might have. I just don't know enough about Weston's early life.
I don't either. I've definitely read like some short biographies of him, but I'm not recalling that particular time period. I feel like he did start young, but not sure about high school.
Yeah.
Or how accessible it would have been, you know, to get serious about it at that age. I'm not sure.
More questions?
So are there any more questions from the audience?
Well, that was terrific to have David talk about his, that's 70 years ago, isn't it? Let's see, can I do the math?
45. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a student here 74 years ago this
Yeah.
summer, so.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Is there a catalog that accompanies the exhibition? The one at Bolinas Museum, unfortunately, there's not, but there's a fantastic book available from Steidl that's incredibly comprehensive, very detailed. And Jennifer, are there still copies of the book available at the museum? Oh, you're on mute.
It was wildly popular and we sold out twice, I think. So we might have a copy or two left. And if so, you can find it on our website in our store.
Great.
There's also one circulating in the Marin collection, and we have another one on order as well, so to check out for the library. So.
It's a really beautiful publication, and it's a wonderful complement to the assortment of photographs that you beautifully brought together in our galleries in really unique ways. I really love the installation. It's so nice to have guest curators come and experience the space with a fresh eye, and Jennifer did a really remarkable job. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So we'd love to have you back another time with another subject someday soon. Jennifer has also curated a wonderful exhibition here of Jack Fulton's work. You mentioned him during your presentation, and we're so delighted to be able to share Jack's work with the public. And Linda Connor has been someone we feature on a regular basis as well, and we are always interested in being able to experience Marin photographers in depth, and are delighted to present exhibitions of this nature here. So proposals are something we accept, and information can be found on our website if you have ideas for stimulating collections of work that you think would be well received here in our community.
Somebody asked what the name of the book was. It's called The Golden Decade, Photography at the California School of Fine Arts, 1945 to 1955. And is it on, well, it's available through the Bolinas Museum, and I think on some Amazon and stuff like that. So yeah. And then would love to see it at the Harvey Milk Photo Center. That would be great. Let's do it.
Amazing.
Yeah, that'd be a terrific show for the Harvey Milk Photo Center for sure. And they've done a great job of showing a lot of these photographers in the past too. So that'd be a cool location for it.
Very. And they've just named their reading or library after David. So
David.
Yeah, so a new library. So that's fantastic. And they had a retrospective of his work there.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like their director is online with us too.
Yeah.
Hi, Dave.
Hi.
So I'm just curious, are there any other large collections that are publicly accessible of this work that people could explore should they wish to go further in depth?
Wife, you can answer that.
David's collection is at the Bancroft Library, UC Berkeley. It's a large collection there.
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, there's a set of Benjamin Chen stuff, a lot of Benjamin Chen things at the Center for Creative Photography in Tucson. And Purple Jones and Ruth Marion Baruch's things are at UC Santa Cruz, and they just finished digitizing them maybe 2 years ago. And it's really fun to see all the ones that they probably, they didn't even print it up. They didn't print a lot of them up. They saw them as contact sheets probably. So it's really interesting to see the range of things. Let's see, who else? And the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art does have small sets of a lot of these photographers.
And then SFAI, of course.
And we have some things too.
I was sort of an open leading question to your collections there, and what the future of them might be.
Well, the past of them is probably sort of the same as the future, where they've been, saved in the attic kind of mentality. And luckily it's San Francisco, where without climate control, the local climate keeps them in okay shape. Although we've done as much to damage everything as we can. But we didn't put tape on the photographs. We didn't put tape over them or anything too destructive. So they are in pretty much their original shape. It's very haphazard though, and nowhere near a complete set of anything. It's very sporadic at best of a set of things. But there's some things done for college catalogs, those things that were done by Bill Hike of scenes around the school, as well as some of their photographs that they did for their class projects as well.
If you need to find a new home for any coastal Marin images, let us know.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good idea. And a very good location for those things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this has been remarkable, and I want to thank you all again for joining in this afternoon, this beautiful summer afternoon on a Friday, and the Larkspur Library for being the technical wizard behind the Zoom and the impetus to bring us together. So, Jeff, your selection was remarkable and so inspiring, and I didn't want it to end. Jennifer, your vision for the exhibition was pretty special and very well appreciated. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you very
I
much.
want to echo what Jennifer says. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jennifer O'Keefe. Thank you, Jennifer from Bolinas Museum. This has been a great talk. We'll do it again. So, and thank you everybody for joining us, and watch your emails. We'll be sending out a link to the recording soon. So have a great afternoon, and we'll see you guys again soon. So bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you all. Thank you.
Thank you.